Good morning, everyone. The Office of the District Attorney serves as the foundation of our criminal justice system and of our county government. The District Attorney bears the responsibility of making sure that there is accountability to the people of Ulster County for crime at all levels, and that there are consequences for when the law is broken. In order to shoulder that heavy burden, the District Attorney must first be reliable himself and be prepared to take responsibility for when there are cracks in the foundation, for when the system in place exposes us to rather than protects us from wrongdoing. Ladies and gentlemen, today I am here to discuss mismanagement in the District Attorney's finances, a lack of fiscal responsibility in the District Attorney's office, and the District Attorney's lack of accountability to the taxpayers. Now, in February 2011, former Police Lieutenant Timothy Matthews was indicted for stealing over $200,000 in taxpayer money, government funds. Nearly $80,000 of that money was stolen from the Ulster Regional Gang Enforcement Narcotics Team, also known as Urgent. Among the sources of the stolen money was Urgent's confidential investigative funds, taxpayer dollars used to make drug buys to prosecute drug dealers. While working on these confidential investigations, a large sum of money was authorized to Matthews directly from this district attorney. Here we see one of the vouchers signed by Mr. Carnwright, directing payment to Timothy Matthews for $5,000. Now, Timothy Matthews is the vendor here, and the amount, of course, as you can see, is $5,000. I am told there is also another voucher for an identical sum for $5,000 from Mr. Carnwright to Matthews. The resulting check, as generated from this voucher seen here, is signed by Matthews and apparently presented for cash. Now, first of all, this makes Mr. Carnwright a material witness in the investigation into Matthews' theft of county funds. And I have been calling upon Mr. Carnwright to recuse himself from the case since April of this year. His stubborn and unnecessary refusal to recuse himself from the investigation and the prosecution taints the outcome of the case and calls into question the ethics of the Ulster County District Attorney's Office. Second of all, it begs the question of what Mr. Carnwright's office has been doing for these past 4 years to keep track of how taxpayer funds are being spent, a question that seems to have been answered by the grand jury. Our tax dollars were not being watched by the district attorney. And the next question really is whether this led to Lieutenant Tim Matthews stealing county money. Under our new charter system of government, it is the county comptroller's job to protect the public interest by monitoring county government and to assess and report on the degree to which its operations are economical and efficient and its financial conditions sound. On March 3rd, 2011, the comptroller requested from the district attorney's office documentation to support the payment of that $5,000 to Matthews by Carnwright back in 2008. Now, 2008, of course, the county comptroller did not actually exist, but the request here comes from the county comptroller, March 3rd, 2011. While still awaiting the district attorney's reply, on March 11th, the comptroller informed the district attorney that, quote, detailed and written internal control protocols governing the use of confidential investigative funds would be required before authorizing further payments. Here we have the March 11th letter from the comptroller to Mr. Carnwright. In response to the comptroller's request to the district attorney, in response to the comptroller's request, the district attorney provided no documentation to support his payment of the $5,000 to Tim Matthews. Only a general explanation that the funds were a reimbursement from the district attorney's office to Urgent. Now, on March 16th, the comptroller reiterated his request for, quote, receipts, documents, or paperwork that support the $5,000 expense. Now, this is an email that literally reads, the question that still remains unanswered is, are there receipts, documents, or paperwork that support the $5,000 expense? This request was made on March 16th, 2011, and no response was given from the DA's office. Now, also lacking in the DA's responses to the Comptroller's office were any written protocols. Ignoring the Comptroller's previous statements requiring protocols before releasing taxpayer dollars for confidential investigations, the District Attorney's Office made further demands for money. On March 16th, a request was filed for $1,000, and on that day, a letter from the Comptroller again asked for written protocols and even attached a sample of such protocols from the United States Department of Justice. Here we see the letter from the Comptroller to the District Attorney's Office dated March 16th. And again, we require a copy of your written internal controls over the use of confidential investigative funds. Almost a week later, on March 22nd, Mr. Carnwright penned a letter to the Comptroller asking for his specific objections to his protocols. Now, lest there be any question about the signature on the voucher being that of Holly Carnwright, here is the letter that he sent to the Comptroller on March 22nd. That very same day, the Comptroller responded to the District Attorney, and his response essentially is, quote, at a minimum, they are inadequate because they are not in writing and therefore practice cannot be audited against protocol. Here is the March 22nd letter from the Comptroller to the District Attorney's Office. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the facts as reflected in the documents recently obtained in a FOIL request from the Comptroller's Office. Evidence of the District Attorney's mismanagement of public funds, as seen here in the voucher and the check to Tim Matthews, issued without documentation. Evidence of the District Attorney's lack of accountability for why he had no written protocols for the use of taxpayer dollars. Mr. Carnwright recently made public statements claiming he had protocols in place and he had provided them to the Comptroller when the investigation began. His statements are intentionally misleading because the evidence shows that he had no written protocols, even after he was provided a sample copy of what the Department of Justice required. There is no way he could have reasonably believed that he had sufficient protections in place if they were not in writing. If they were sufficient, he could have just written them down and given them to the Comptroller's Office upon request. But instead, he repeatedly refused to cooperate with the county's financial watchdog. For over 6 months, the Ulster County Comptroller's Office waited for written protocols from Mr. Carnwright's office without a single check being written for financial investigations. Now, as a citizen of Ulster County and as a candidate for district attorney, I ask these questions. First of all, on what did Lieutenant Matthews spend that $5,000? Second, where is the documentation for how that money was spent? Third, why didn't the district attorney's office provide this documentation when asked by the Ulster County Comptroller? Now, I also want to know why there weren't written protocols for the handling of confidential investigative funds prior to March of 2011. Why did the district attorney resist providing the Comptroller with acceptable written protocols when asked to do so in March of 2011? This is not a radical request. It is standard operating procedure, which can be seen in the sample protocols from the Department of Justice provided by the Comptroller to the District Attorney. And we have copies of that if you wish to take a look at them. But finally, this is my question. Where has Mr. Carnwright been getting the money for his office's confidential investigations since March 2011? The people have a right to know. Thank you. Are there any questions?
So there are still no protocols as far as you know. And you said why were no protocols in place prior to March 2011? Do they exist now?
It is my understanding that something was issued to the Comptroller's office from the District Attorney's office. I believe the date was September 22nd, 2011. I do not know whether or not the protocols proposed were deemed acceptable by the Comptroller, and they were not provided to me in a request for information of public records.
Do you have any proof or evidence that Holly has in fact gotten confidential investigative money since March?
I am not aware, so I'm asking this question. I don't know where. I would be curious to know, which is why I posed the question, and I'm interested in hearing the answer. Any other questions?
Where this confidential investigative money, what was the source of it? I mean, obviously it comes from the county, but what was the...
Well, the money that's used in law enforcement comes from a variety of different sources. One is, of course, taxpayer dollars in the budget. To the extent that there is any asset forfeiture work, my reading of the county budget shows a very small amount of asset forfeiture money actually being listed as generated revenue in the budget. If it's coming from other sources, that's my question to you. That's my question to Mr. Carnwright, which is what is the source of the money that he's been using? From what I can see here, it hasn't been coming from the Comptroller's office. And the reason why it hasn't been coming from the Comptroller's office, according to these records, is because the DA has stubbornly refused to provide written protocols. An example of the internal controls over the money. Where is the documentation? Those controls would require specific documentation. Apparently, we don't have any.
Now, as far as you know, the only things you signed off on Tim Matthews were this one that you had in March 2008 for $5,000, but you believe there's another one?
I have been told that there is another voucher for an equal amount of money for $5,000 that is signed. From when exactly, I'm not sure. Are there any more questions?
Is this an isolated incident?
I think this situation represents a pattern of mismanagement in the district attorney's office. It's fairly clear from the evidence here that there is a level of mismanagement and a lack of fiscal responsibility. But there are other aspects of mismanagement. One is in the handling of some of the cases. We have seen incidents, whether it be the animal cruelty case out in Wawarsing and Ellenville, where the case was dismissed by the court and the DA's office did not respond with an appeal, whether it be the situation where the court dismissed the charges and sealed the grand jury report on the jail debacle investigation. Again, the district attorney's office did not even file an appeal. These are situations, they are missed opportunities to protect the public trust. We've also seen mismanagement in cases of violent crime in the city of Kingston, where there was an incident where an individual was released on parole, committed a crime on January 1st. A parole hold was lodged, and this is the case of the people against Jeffrey Keith. A parole hold was lodged against this individual in conjunction with with the matter of a shooting and a pistol whipping of a woman on January 1st. The DA's office failed to procure the witnesses, to make sure that the witnesses were available and ready to testify. As a result, the parole proceeding was essentially dismissed for lack of witnesses to hold for a significant period of time, and for whatever reason the DA's office did not make an application to increase the bail on the case in chief, on the shooting and the pistol whipping case. Mr. Keith made the $300 bail, which would not be set in any matter where there was not otherwise another hold. He made the $300 bail, and a few months later, he is again charged with attempted murder, again with a shooting. So this is a level of mismanagement where the district attorney's office needs to take responsibility, first of all, for its actions, and second of all, needs to tighten up its procedures and make sure that the DA's office is connecting with even reluctant witnesses. Mismanagement in the cases, mismanagement as far as financial matters are concerned, and mismanagement and a lack of leadership, I think, is what we've seen in this district attorney's office. Are there any other questions? Thank you very much.